What would you do if a single sentence from a government clerk exposed a truth your own family hid from you for decades? How do you react when a supervisor looks at your face, checks the screen, and quietly says, "Sir, this isn't possible"? That moment took me back to when I was 19 and my stepfather told me I didn't belong. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Daniel Hart. I am 42 years old and I work for the city, fixing broken things other people walk past. Streetlights that flicker, benches that lean to one side, signs that twist in the wind. My day is simple. Put on the orange vest, take the work truck, follow the list. Come home to a small rental apartment that stays quiet even when my head is loud. People say I am calm. They say it like it is the same thing as weak. I let them. You learn early that some fights cost more than they are worth. I learned that in my mother's kitchen when I was a teenager and my stepfather started using words like guest and charity instead of son. That was a long time ago, but the way he looked at me never changed. It still felt like I was borrowing space from him, even when I stood on my own 2 feet. The night before everything started, my mother called. She said they were doing a small dinner for my sister, Mira. She said it would mean a lot if I came. Her voice had that careful tone, like she was asking a favor she was not sure she deserved. I said I would come after my shift. I did not ask who else would be there. I already knew. Their house sits in a quiet suburb on the edge of town. Same place they moved into when I was in middle school. Same white siding. Same dull gray roof. The lawn is always trimmed sharp. When I pulled up, it looked like a photo in a real estate ad. Warm lights in the windows, a car in the driveway. Nothing on the surface out of place. My mother opened the door before I could knock. She hugged me fast, like someone checking a box. She told me I looked tired. She said work must be hard with the budget cuts. She led me into the dining room. The table was already set. Mira sat at the far end in a new blouse, hair perfect, laughing at something on her phone. Rick sat at the head, like always, holding a glass of wine. Rick nodded at me. He did not stand up. He asked if I was still at that city job, in the same way someone asks if a rash is still there. He said it must be nice to have safe work when other people take risks in business. Mira glanced up, gave me a quick smile, then went back to her screen. Mother fussed with a serving dish to fill the silence. We ate. They talked about Mira's promotion at the insurance company, about her plans to buy a condo closer to downtown, about Rick's golf group and some friend who just bought a boat. When my mother asked how my work was going, I said hours had been cut a little. I said the city was trimming staff. I tried to keep my voice even. It was just a fact. Rick did not miss it. He said it was not surprising. He said people who rely on simple jobs always end up coming back to the family, hat in hand. He said it like he was sharing wisdom, not twisting a knife. Mira laughed and said I always land on my feet somehow. She said it in that light, floaty voice that sounds friendly until you listen to the words. My mother stared at her plate. I did what I always do. I let the words pass. I cut my food into small pieces. I listened. When Mira blew out the candle on a small cake, she thanked everyone but did not look at me. Rick raised his glass and talked about his family and how proud he was of Mira. When he said the word family, he turned his head just enough to look past me instead of at me. It was a small thing. My chest felt tight anyway. After dinner, I helped carry plates to the sink. My mother whispered that Rick was under stress because of retirement money. She said he did not mean anything by it. She said I should not be so sensitive. She always used those words when he went too far. Sensitive, overreacting, adding drama. I told her I was fine. I thanked her for dinner. I said I needed to get home and rest before work. Rick called out from the living room as I put on my jacket. He asked if I had my papers in order. He said the world was harsh for people who did not belong anywhere. He did not look at me when he said it. He watched the television. A game show host shouted in the background. Mira laughed at the screen. My mother stood between us like a piece of furniture. I walked out without answering. The drive back to my apartment was short but heavy. The dashboard lights made the inside of the truck glow a dull orange. I could still hear Rick calling me someone who did not belong. I parked, climbed the stairs to my place, and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. I stared at the wall until my mind went quiet. I knew I would need help if hours kept dropping at work. Rent does not care about pride. The next morning, my supervisor at the city garage confirmed the bad news. Hours were dropping more. He said there might be a freeze on overtime for the next few months. He spoke in a careful voice, the way people talk when they are trying not to apologize. I said I understood. It was not his fault. After our talk, I sat in the break room and looked at my paycheck stub. Numbers do not lie. The math was simple. It would not stretch. I had never asked the city for help. I had never asked my family for real help either, not since I was a kid. But the city has programs for workers when hours are cut. That was what my supervisor said. He told me to visit the county office downtown. He said it like it was no big deal, just paperwork, just a safety net. I told him I would go on my day off. The county benefits office sat on the ground floor of an old building, the kind with high ceilings and long fluorescent lights that buzz softly. The lobby was full of plastic chairs and people holding folders. A television on the wall played a news channel with the sound turned down. I took a number from a small red machine and sat. My palms felt a little sweaty. My number was 72. The screen at the front showed 68. While I waited, I thought about Mira's new condo and Rick's comments. I felt a hot mix of shame and stubbornness in my chest. I knew this program existed for people like me, people who worked hard and still got squeezed. I told myself this was the system, not my family. Systems are cold, but they can also be fair. People are the ones who add poison. When my number came up, a woman called my name. She was in her early 30s, tidy dark hair pulled back, a badge with the name Olivia on it. Her voice was calm. She asked how she could help me. I told her about my hours. I told her I was looking for something temporary to bridge the gap. I kept my hands flat on my knees so she would not see the tremor. Olivia nodded and turned to her computer. She asked for my ID, date of birth, address. I handed over my driver's license. She typed for a while, eyes on the screen. Her fingers moved fast. Then they slowed. Her brows pulled together. Her mouth pressed into a line. I have spent my life watching faces. You learn more from eyes than from words. Something on that screen was wrong. She asked me to confirm my full name, my mother's name, my stepfather's name. She asked if I had ever been known by another last name. I said no. Hart was the name on my birth certificate. It was the one thing from before my stepfather that stayed with me. Olivia's eyes flicked from the screen to my face and back again. Her shoulders shifted. The air between us felt heavier. I asked if there was a problem. I kept my voice light, like I was asking about the weather. Olivia swallowed. She said the system was showing an existing record with unusual notes. She did not explain. She said she needed to get her supervisor to review it. She told me to stay seated. Her tone changed on that last part. It was not a suggestion. It was an order hidden in polite words. She walked away from her desk toward a glass front office at the back. I watched her knock and lean inside. A man in his 50s looked up from a stack of files. He wore a plain shirt, no tie, and glasses that had seen years of use. His badge said Harold Keene. Olivia spoke in a low voice and pointed back toward me. Harold glanced past her shoulder and met my eyes for a brief second. Then he stood up. Harold walked to the workstation next to Olivia's. He did not sit. He leaned in, hands on the desk, and looked at the screen. Olivia tapped a few keys. The monitor glow lit both their faces. I could not see the text, but I saw the change in his jaw. It tightened, then set. He asked Olivia something. She replied and shook her head. He straightened his back and looked at me again. This time, the look lasted longer. After a moment, Harold came over to my side of the counter. He did not sit at the desk between us. He stood close enough that I could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes. He said my name, slowly, like he was tasting it. Then he apologized for the delay. He said the system had raised a long-standing alert on my record. He said this kind of thing did not happen often. I asked what kind of alert. The words came out quieter than I meant. Harold took a breath. He said he needed me to understand something before they went any further. He told me the computer showed changes made to my identity record many years ago. He said those changes were marked as questionable by a clerk at the time, but never fully resolved. He said I had been flagged ever since. I felt my heart pick up its pace, but my body stayed still. Training from life, not from any army, kept me seated. I asked what that meant. Harold looked at me with a steady gaze. He said he needed me to stay calm. He said someone had made changes they had no right to make. He said it looked like those changes had followed me my whole adult life without my knowledge. My mouth went dry. I thought of Rick and his talk about papers and belonging. I thought of locked drawers in my mother's bedroom that I was never allowed to open. I thought of that feeling, always at the edge of my life, that something was bent just slightly out of shape. Olivia sat very still at her desk, eyes wide, as if she was watching a fire start in slow motion. Harold said he was going to print the full report from the system so he could explain it properly. He said it would take a moment. He stepped back toward Olivia's workstation and pressed a few keys. Somewhere behind the counter, a printer woke up with a whirring sound and began to spit out pages. I heard the steady rhythm of paper feeding. The first page slid out with my name in bold at the top. My name is Daniel Hart, and when that printer started spitting out pages with my name on top, my first thought was that there had been some silly mistake. Maybe a typo, maybe a mix-up with someone else who shared my last name. Things like that happen in big systems all the time. That is what I told myself while I watched the stack of paper grow. Harold waited for the report to finish. He did not let me see it. He took the pages, flipped through the first few, and his face tightened again. He told me in a careful voice that he needed to speak with the records department before he could explain. He said the alert on my file went back many years and was connected to identity changes that should not have been approved without deeper review. He asked me to come back in a few days. He said he would schedule a follow-up appointment. Olivia gave me a small card with a date and time written neatly in blue ink. Her fingers trembled a little when she handed it over. I asked them if my request for assistance was denied. Harold said no, not yet, but everything was on hold, until they confirmed what my record meant. He spoke like someone walking on thin ice. Outside, the air felt colder than it should have. The sky over the downtown buildings was flat and gray. I sat on a concrete bench near the entrance and watched people go in and out. Some looked tired, some looked angry, some looked numb. I wondered which one I looked like. My heart had slowed down, but there was a new kind of pressure behind my ribs. Not panic. Something else. Something like pieces clicking into place. I have always had a feeling that I was slightly off the grid, you could say. Not in any dramatic way, just small things. Times when paperwork took too long. Times when a school office could not find my file right away. Times when my mother said she would handle it and then came back tense and quiet. I used to think it was bad luck. Sitting on that bench, I realized maybe it was not luck at all. My stepfather once told me, when I was 19, that I did not belong in his house. He said it in the middle of an argument about something simple. I do not even remember the first part. Maybe it was about dishes, maybe it was about the car. What I remember is the end. Him standing in the kitchen doorway, blocking my way, telling me I was a guest he had tolerated for too long. He did not shout. That was the worst part. His voice was calm, like he was explaining a policy at work. He said he married my mother, not me. He said I should be grateful he kept a roof over my head at all. He said boys like me usually end up in the system and stay there. He called me an extra responsibility he never asked for, an expensive mistake, a burden. And my mother stood by the sink with her hands in the dishwater, staring down at the plates. She did not tell him to stop. She said quietly that I should not push him when he was tired. She asked me to apologize. I did. Not because I was wrong, but because I wanted the shouting to stop before it started. Even then, I knew how fast a calm voice could turn sharp. I was not always extra. When I was small, it was just me and my mother in a tiny basement apartment. I remember her working nights at a grocery store, then at a diner. She was tired, but when she smiled at me, it was real. We did not have much, but I felt like I belonged somewhere. My last name, Hart, was on the mailbox and on my school folder. It was simple. Rick came into the picture when I was about 8. He was taller than anyone in my world at the time. He wore pressed shirts and had a car with seats that did not squeak. My mother changed when he was around. She stood straighter, laughed more, wore nicer clothes. I did not understand what that meant then. I just liked that there were sometimes takeout dinners and new shoes. At first, Rick tried. He brought me a toy car one day and said it was from the man of the house to the little man. I remember that line because my mother loved it. But small cracks showed early. He called me kid more than he used my name. When they married and we moved into his house, he joked that I should not scratch his walls. Not our walls, his. There was always a tiny gap between me and the rest of them. My school pictures sat on a side table, in frames my mother bought. Rick's framed photos with Mira later went on the main wall. There was a big family portrait over the fireplace after Mira was born, showing Rick, my mother, and baby Mira. I was not in that one. My mother said the photographer's package was small, only included 3 people. When I was around 12, I heard the word beneficiary for the first time. I was sitting at the top of the stairs after bedtime, listening to the murmur of adult voices below. Rick was upset about something he had received in the mail. Papers from that lawyer, he said. He told my mother that the boy is not my blood, and he did not want to be responsible for someone else's old contracts. My mother whispered that it would be handled, that forms could be changed. At the time, all I understood was that I was somehow tangled up with a piece of paper he did not like. In high school, when other kids talked about college, I mostly stayed quiet. Money was always tight, according to Rick. He said if I wanted further study, I should get loans or join the military or work my way up like real men. My mother once mentioned some old account my father had left. Rick snapped that it was nothing important and that it had been sordid. After that, she never brought it up again. When Mira was born, everything shifted another inch. She had Rick's last name. She had Rick's nose and his smile. He carried her around like she was made of glass and sunshine. They called her our miracle. When she was old enough to talk, she called him Daddy. She called me Danny, like it was a nickname, not a brother's name. When guests came, Rick introduced her as his daughter. He introduced me as Elaine's boy. The older I got, the clearer the line became. When Mira turned 10, Rick threw a big party in the backyard. My name was on the invitation, but when he raised a toast, he talked about his family and the daughter who made him a father. My mother smiled and dabbed at her eyes. I stood near the fence holding a plastic cup and listened. At 17, I asked about getting my own ID card, bank account, those simple adult things. Rick insisted on reviewing my paperwork. He said he needed to approve what went on the forms since we lived under his roof. At the DMV, they had trouble finding my record at first. The woman behind the counter said something about a note on my file. Rick leaned in, spoke quietly to her. She glanced at me, then nodded and typed something. A few minutes later, she printed my card and handed it over. On the drive home, he told me I should learn not to ask questions about things above my pay grade. When I was 19 and that kitchen argument happened, I realized fully that I was not part of his long-term plan. He said outright that once I moved out, I should not expect help. He said he had already done more than most men would. He said boys like me were replaceable, guests, temporary. It stung more than I let him see. I moved into a tiny room over a repair shop. I took whatever work I could find. Warehouse, night shifts, then finally the city maintenance job. It was steady, and I liked fixing things. Metal and wood do not play mind games. A broken bolt is just a broken bolt. You do not have to guess its opinion of you. Over the years, I showed up to family events when invited. Birthdays, holidays, Mira's graduation. She hugged me and said I was the best big brother, then went back to talk to Rick about internships. At her wedding, Rick walked her down the aisle. My mother said it was traditional, and I should understand. I did a reading. People clapped politely. The photographer took lots of pictures of the happy couple and the proud parents. I waited off to the side until someone remembered to include me in a group shot with some cousins. Small patterns, repeated long enough, become normal. You stop noticing how they hurt, you just live around them. So when I sat outside the county office that day, with the sound of the printer still faint in my ears, I thought about all those little moments. The missing photos, the strange looks at government offices, the whispered arguments about my paperwork when they thought I was asleep. I went back to work the next day like nothing had happened. The guys in the garage asked how the appointment went. I said it was just forms and waiting. I did not mention the word flag. I did not mention Harold's face. There are some things you do not say until you understand them yourself. During lunch, I sat in the corner with my sandwich and my thermos of coffee. I took out the small appointment card Olivia had given me and turned it over in my fingers. On the back, she had written a note that said, "Ask for Harold directly." That felt important. People in systems do not usually step out of line like that unless something really bothers them. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from my mother. She does not text often. When she does, it is usually about holidays or small updates about Mira. I wiped my fingers on a napkin and picked it up. Her message was short. She wrote that we needed to talk. She said my attitude at dinner had really upset my stepfather. She added that I should not create tension in the family when Mira was doing so well. I stared at the words for a long moment. My attitude, his feelings, her success, nothing about the county office, nothing about me. Still, the timing made my skin prickle. It felt like the past was folding over the present. Same script, new scene. I typed back that I was at work and could not talk right then. I said we could meet later if she wanted. I almost added something about the flag on my record, about how someone had changed my identity file years ago. I stopped myself. For the first time in a long time, I did not rush to explain or to calm anyone down. I put the phone face down on the table and looked at the appointment card again. The date circled on, it felt bigger than it looked. My mother's message sat there, unread a second time, in the notification bar. Between the two small rectangles of paper and glass, one thing was clear. Whatever my stepfather thought he controlled about my life, there was something else now. Something written into the system long ago. Something someone else had flagged as wrong and left there, waiting. My name is Daniel Hart, and I showed up to the park because my mother asked me to. It was a Saturday afternoon, one of those days that looks warm from the window but feels colder when the wind hits you. The park sat on the edge of town with a small lake, a walking path, and a few picnic shelters. Families were grilling, kids were chasing each other near the playground. From far away, everything looked normal. My mother had texted me the night before. She said they wanted to clear the air after Mira's birthday dinner. She said it would be more comfortable to talk outside. When a person uses that many soft words, it usually means the opposite. But I agreed anyway. Old habits are strong. They chose a picnic shelter near the parking lot. When I walked up, I saw them already there. My mother sat on one side of the metal table, hands wrapped around a paper cup of coffee. Mira was next to her in a light jacket, scrolling through her phone as usual. Rick sat at the head of the table, back straight, arms folded across his chest like he was supervising a meeting. There was an empty spot across from them. I knew it was mine without anyone saying. "Daniel," my mother said, standing up halfway before settling back down. "Thanks for coming?" "Sure," I said. "What's going on?" Rick did not wait. "What's going on," he said, "is that your behavior at dinner was out of line." He said it calmly, no raised voice, no anger on the surface. Just that flat tone he always used when he wanted to sound reasonable while cutting you down. A tone I knew too well. I sat down and folded my hands on the table. "I don't remember doing anything," I said. "I ate. I listened. I left." "You left in a mood," Rick replied, storming out like that, making everyone uncomfortable. I thought back to that night. I had helped clear the plates. I had said thank you. I had put on my jacket and walked out the door without slamming it. Maybe, to him, quiet was the same as a storm. It would not be the first time he misread silence. "I had work early," I said. "I told Mom that." Mira finally looked up from her phone. "You were tense," she said. "You always are at family events, Danny. It brings everyone down. We just wanted to celebrate." Her words were light, but her eyes were sharp. When she was younger, she used those eyes to ask me for help with homework. Now they felt like a tool Rick had trained. My mother tried to smooth things over. "We just worry about you," she said. "You seem angry lately. Your stepfather thinks maybe you're holding on to things from the past." Rick snorted. "He's always held on to things," he said. "Old grudges. Old stories about being hard done by. At some point, you have to grow up and stop blaming everyone else." I let the words settle for a moment before I answered. The wind pushed some dry leaves across the concrete floor of the shelter. Somewhere behind us, a kid laughed too loud at something on the playground. "I didn't call this meeting," I said. "You did, so tell me why I'm here." Rick leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You're here," he said, "because this family has worked hard to build something. Stability, respect, a name, and you keep finding ways to make us look like we're failing you." He lifted his hand and ticked off points on his fingers. "You've had job problems, money problems. You always act like we've abandoned you. We invite you to things out of kindness, and you show up with that chip on your shoulder. It needs to stop." I studied his face. He looked the same as always. Gray at the temples now, lines deeper around the mouth, but the same eyes. Cold when he talked about me. Warm when he talked about Mira. "I asked for a ride home once," I said quietly. "When my old truck died. That's the only time I remember asking you for help in the past 10 years. "You ask in other ways," he said. "You show up with that look, like we owe you something, like you're waiting for us to fix your life." I wanted to laugh. I didn't. I just watched him. Rick had built a whole story about me in his head. In that story, he was the generous stepfather, and I was the thankless extra. "Look," Mira said, shifting closer to him. "We're not trying to gang up on you, Danny. We just feel like every time we see you, there's some new problem. Hours cut at work, something with rent. It's always heavy. Sometimes we just want peace." Peace. Her peace was my silence. I understood that now. I could have argued. I could have listed all the times I kept my mouth shut. The years I lived on the edge alone, the things I never told them because I knew exactly how this would go. But something in me had shifted at that county office. Once you see your name on a screen with the word flag next to it, some things become clear. "I went to the county office," I said instead, like my supervisor suggested, "to ask about temporary assistance because of the hours." Rick rolled his eyes. "Of course you did." "They found something," I went on. "In my record, something that's been there for years." Mira frowned. "Like what?" Her voice was more curious than concerned. I watched their faces now, not the sky, not the table. My mother's fingers tightened around her coffee cup. The knuckles went white. Rick's jaw moved slightly, like he was grinding his teeth. The clerk said there were changes made to my identity file, I said. A long time ago. Changes that shouldn't have been approved. For a half second, Rick's eyes flicked to my mother's. It was fast, but not fast enough. Reflex. Guilt leaves a shadow even when you try to hide it. My mother cleared her throat. Government offices make mistakes all the time, she said. I'm sure it's nothing, a computer error. You shouldn't upset yourself over clerical things. It's not just an error, I said. They've had an alert on my name for years. Someone flagged it. They just never finished the review. Rick sat back and gave a short, dry laugh. So now the system is out to get you too? He said. Come on, Daniel. You always think you're at the center of some big drama. You're not that important. I kept my voice steady. I didn't say I was important. I said somebody changed my record when I was young. The supervisor told me that much. He said someone made changes they had no right to make. Silence sat down at the table with us then. Mira glanced between our faces. My mother stared at a crack in the concrete floor. Rick studied me like I was a loose nail in one of his old warehouses. Finally, he spoke. Listen carefully, he said. Whatever those people told you, you need to understand something. You are not tied to this family in any legal way. Do you hear me? None. You're an adult. You make your choices. We make ours. There are no obligations here. There never were. The words hit in layers. First, the old sting. You don't belong. Then under that, something new. There never were. Past tense and present tense twisted together. No obligations, no ties, no legal nothing. My mother flinched. Rick, she said softly, you don't have to say it like that. How else should I say it? He snapped. Then his voice went smooth again. He keeps coming around like we're some safety net. We're not. We've done our duty, more than enough. He should stand on his own 2 feet and stop digging into things that don't concern him. Mira spoke up, but her voice lacked its earlier brightness. Danny, maybe you're reading too much into what the clerk said. You know how you get with details. You fix things for a living. You see cracks everywhere. I looked at my sister, at the girl I once taught to ride a bike in this same park while our mother watched from a bench, at the young woman who now saw me as an inconvenient older brother who made family dinners uncomfortable. I fix things that are broken, I said, and when I can't fix them, I at least try to understand how they broke. Rick sighed. This is exactly what I mean. You're always digging, always dragging up old history. Your father, your past, some old account. Let it go. None of that is part of this family's life. It never was. Whatever paperwork there was back then, it was handled. Right, Elaine? He looked at my mother as he said that last part. Not a question. A reminder. She nodded, eyes still down. It was a long time ago, she murmured. You were just a child. It doesn't matter now. And to them, maybe it didn't. To the system, it still did. There was a flag, a record, a clerk who had written a note about questionable changes, a supervisor who looked at my face and said someone had made choices they were not allowed to make. I realized, sitting there at that cold picnic table, that this conversation was not about helping me. It was about distance, about making it clear, again, that I was not one of them. They wanted to scrub away any idea that they owed me anything, emotionally, financially, legally. The difference this time was that it wasn't just their word against mine. Somewhere, in a database and in a stack of old paper, there were facts. Someone outside this family had looked at my file and thought, this is wrong, and pressed a button to mark it. I pushed my hands against the edge of the table and stood up. My chair scraped lightly on the concrete. All 3 of them looked up at me like they expected another argument. The old version of me would have given them one. Raised voice, hurt words, long explanations about feelings and fairness. I hear you, I said instead. Rick frowned. What does that mean? It means I understand, I said. You've been clear about how you see me. I don't need more examples. My mother's lips parted. Daniel, we're just trying to... I know what you're trying to do, I said, still calm. It's fine. I'll handle my own problems, like always. I turned to Mira. And you, I added, don't worry. I won't bring heavy things to your celebrations anymore. You can have your peace. Guilt flickered across her face for a second, then smoothed away. Danny, that's not what I... It's okay, I said. Really. I walked away from the shelter, across the stretch of grass toward the parking lot. The wind cut through my jacket. My steps felt steady. Behind me, I heard my mother say my name once, soft. I did not turn around. At my truck, I unlocked the door and slid inside. I did not start the engine right away. I sat with my hands on the steering wheel and watched the park through the windshield. From this distance, my family looked like any other group of people at a picnic table. You could not hear the words. You could only see shapes and movements. A shoulder shrug, a head shaking, a coffee cup lifted and set down. My mind drifted, uninvited, to an older memory. I was maybe 6 or 7, sitting at our little kitchen table in the basement apartment before Rick. My mother had a thick envelope on the table. It had my name on it in big letters, Daniel Hart. I remember tracing the letters with my finger. She took my hand away. "Don't smudge it," she said. "These are important papers." "From who?" I had asked. "From a lawyer," she said. "About some things your father left. But don't worry about that. Grown-up stuff." Later, after Rick came, I saw a similar envelope in his hand one night. Same kind of thick paper, same serious weight. He was angry that time. He called it old obligations and someone else's mess. My mother whispered that forms can be changed and signatures added to make things easier. Then she noticed me watching from the hallway and sent me back to my room. Sitting in my truck now, decades later, I felt those fragments line up with Harold's words about unauthorized changes and long-standing alerts. Pieces that never made sense before slid into the same slot. I did not know the full picture yet, but I knew this. Whatever Rick had handled back then, the system had not fully accepted it. Somewhere, in a file I had never seen, the truth was written down. And for the first time in my life, I had someone on my side who was not part of this family. As I turned the key in the ignition, a sudden bright flash lit up the inside of the cab. I looked up, startled. Near the picnic shelter, a teenager held a phone in front of her and took a group selfie with her friends. The camera light burst once more, catching the shelter in the background. For a split second, I saw my mother, Rick, and Mira frozen in that light, like figures in a picture I did not belong to. Then the flash faded. The engine rumbled to life. I pulled out of the parking lot and drove away, already thinking about my next appointment with Harold. My name is Daniel Hart, and when I walked back into the county office for my follow-up appointment, I felt calmer than I should have. Maybe it was because I'd already accepted that something was wrong with my records. Once you know there's a crack, you stop being surprised when water starts coming through. You just want to see where it starts. Olivia was at her desk again. She looked up when I came in and gave me a small, quick smile, like we were sharing a secret neither of us had asked for. "Mr. Hart," she said, "you can go straight back. Harold's expecting you." No waiting this time. No plastic chair, no number on a screen. That alone told me things were different. Harold's office was small and full of paper. Notebooks stacked on one side, files in neat piles on the other. A big monitor on his desk glowed with a spreadsheet I couldn't read from the doorway. He stood when I walked in and shook my hand like I was someone important, not just another name in the system. "Daniel," he said, "come in. Close the door, please." I did. The click sounded louder than it should have. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. I sat. He sat. For a moment, he just looked at me like he was deciding where to start. "I've been digging into your file," he said finally. "I also spoke with records over at the archives." I nodded, keeping my hand still in my lap. "Okay. I want to be clear," he went on. "What I'm about to say is not legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just telling you what the documents say from an administrative point of view." "That's fine," I said. "I just want facts." He picked up a thin folder from his desk and tapped it with 2 fingers. "Your identity record," he said, "shows that when you were a minor, there was an attached note about a financial instrument, something tied to your name. It doesn't say exactly what it was, but the code we see is used for things like trusts, insurance, long-term accounts." "Something my father left?" I asked. The word father felt strange in my mouth. I barely remembered the man. "Possibly," Harold said. "The original note appears when you're about 5. Then, a few years later, there are changes. A request comes in to adjust the linked information. That request is flagged by the clerk working at the time as questionable." He turned the folder around so I could see the top page. He'd placed a sticky note over part of it, blocking some details, but I could read one short line scratched in faded ink. "Guardian requests alteration. Minor cannot consent." "The clerk wrote that," Harold said, tapping the line, "and then she hit a button to put a flag on your record. That's the alert we're seeing now." "What happened after that?" I asked. He sighed. "That's the messy part. Somewhere along the line, someone higher up approved the changes anyway, but they never removed the flag. They just pushed it forward, added a note to review when minor reaches adulthood. Only the review never happened. So it just sat there," I said, "all this time." He nodded. Every time someone opened your file, they probably saw a little red symbol and thought someone else would deal with it. It happens more than I like to admit. I thought about the DMV woman years ago, typing something fast after Rick whispered to her. I thought about the delay, the quick glance, the way she'd fixed her face before handing me the card. Can you see what the change actually was? I asked. What they altered? Harold shook his head slowly. Not from here. The detail is in the original documents, and those are stored over at the archives. There's a note that part of the file was sealed for 20 years due to the type of arrangement. That seal expires very soon. How soon? I asked. He turned his monitor toward me and pointed at a date on the screen. It was next month, less than 4 weeks away. When the seal expires, he said, you can request the full record yourself. Right now, I can only see the summary codes. So I just wait, I said. And then what? Ask the archives politely? Harold smiled a little. You don't have to wait to start asking questions, he said. You just can't see everything yet. But you can start lining things up. Do you have anyone you trust who can give you actual legal advice? I thought of high school. A skinny kid with a serious face from my math class who always talked about wanting to be a lawyer. We'd lost touch after graduation. Then, a few years ago, I'd seen his face on a bus stop ad downtown. Quan and Associates, Estates and Administrative Law. It had been a strange moment, seeing someone from my past dressed in a suit, smiling at traffic. Maybe, I said. Harold nodded. If I were in your shoes, I'd bring someone like that with me when I go to archives. This kind of thing. If there was money involved, or rights, or some kind of beneficiary status, you want someone who knows the language. Money, I repeated softly. The word pulled up a memory like a hook. My mother at the kitchen table with that thick envelope. Rick calling my life someone else's mess. Him saying old obligations in a tone that made the hairs on my neck stand up. Harold must have seen something in my face because he leaned back and spoke more gently. I'm sorry, Mr. Hart, he said. I can't tell you more until the seal lifts, but I can tell you this much. Someone changed your file in a way that was not straightforward, and the system remembered, even if people did not. Thank you, I said. My voice felt rough. He handed me a small printed slip. This is your next benefits appointment, he said. Olivia will process the assistance once we have this cleaned up. In the meantime, here's the formal request form for access to sealed records. You can file it at the archives now, and they'll be ready when the date hits. The form was thin, just a single page, but it felt heavier than it should have in my hand. My name at the top. A section for description of records requested. Another for reason for request. Lines waiting for ink. As I walked out past Olivia's desk, she gave me a questioning look. I lifted the form slightly so she could see. Her mouth pressed into a line, and she nodded once, like she was wishing me luck without saying it out loud. Outside, I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in exhaust and cold air. Cars honked. A bus roared past. Life kept moving. I folded the form carefully and slid it into my jacket pocket. On my break at the maintenance garage that afternoon, I pulled out my phone and searched for Quan and Associates. The bus stop ad hadn't lied. The office was downtown, in one of those narrow brick buildings that always smell like paper and old air. I called the number, half expecting a receptionist to brush me off. Instead, a calm voice listened as I explained that I'd been referred to them for an issue with old records. What kind of records? She asked. Identity, maybe a trust, I said. Something from when I was a kid. There's a seal on the file that's about to expire. There was a pause, then she asked my name. Daniel Hart. Another pause. One moment, Mr. Hart. Soft hold music started, something with a piano. After a minute, another voice came on the line. Deep, familiar in a way that made my palms sweat. Daniel Hart, it said. This is Sam Quan, from Eastview High, if I'm remembering right. I blinked, then laughed once, short and disbelieving. Sam? Yeah, that's me. Well, I'll be, he said. Haven't heard that name in years. What's going on? I told him the short version. The flag, the old changes, the upcoming seal expiration. I kept my words steady, but I think he heard the strain underneath. This sounds like estates or beneficiary stuff, he said when I finished. You're right, you shouldn't walk into that alone. I've got an opening tomorrow morning. Can you come by at 9? I can, I said. I start late tomorrow. Good, he said. Bring whatever papers they gave you. We'll take a look. The next morning, I sat across from him in a small office with shelves full of thick books. Sam looked older, like me. Less hair, more lines around the eyes. But his expression when he was thinking hard was exactly the same. He scanned the form Harold had given me and the little note about the sealed file. Then he sat back and steepled his fingers. Here's what this looks like, he said slowly. When you were little, there was some kind of account or arrangement with your name on it, maybe from your biological father, maybe from another relative, something that triggered a special code. Later, your guardians requested changes. The clerk thought it was fishy and flagged it. Someone higher up let it go through anyway, but kept the flag. Now, 20 years later, the seal is ending, which means you have the right to see exactly what was done. And if what was done was wrong? I asked. Then, he said, we look at whether there's any way to challenge it. It might be too late to reverse certain things, but not always, especially if there was fraud. Forged signatures, misrepresentation. This stuff can get interesting. Interesting for a lawyer. For me, it was my life. I rubbed a hand over my face. My stepfather always said he handled things, that whatever my father left wasn't important. But I remember my mother calling something an obligation. Money, maybe. I was too young to understand. Sam nodded. I believe you. These patterns show up all the time. Someone steps in, decides they know better than the person who actually has rights, and rearranges things to suit themselves. The paper trail doesn't lie as easily as people do. The way he said that made something settle in my chest. Not comfort, exactly, but a kind of steady weight. A center. So what do we do? I asked. First, you go to the archives and file this request. He tapped the form. Ask for everything tied to your identity record at the time of the change. Names, dates, signatures. Sometimes they'll give you a partial description even before the seal lifts, but they won't let you read the documents until the exact date. I already have the form, I said. Harold gave it to me. Good, Sam said. Second, you don't talk about this with your family. Not yet. I looked up. You think they're involved? He raised an eyebrow. You told me your stepfather has a history of controlling paperwork and telling you not to ask questions. You said your mother mentioned some account once and never again. You said he talked to a clerk at the DMV who suddenly made a problem disappear. Put that together with what Harold told you. Does it sound like strangers did this to you? No, it didn't. I can't make you silent, Sam said. But if they're the ones who altered things, you don't want to give them time to adjust their story, or to decide what you're allowed to know. I thought of Rick leaning across the picnic table, telling me I had no legal ties to them. He had sounded almost proud, like a man who'd solved a puzzle. I won't tell them, I said quietly. Good, Sam said. Once we have the documents, we'll sit down and go through them together. There may be nothing we can do, or there may be a lot. Either way, you'll finally see what everyone else has been seeing about you for years. On my way to the archives, I stopped by my apartment and dug through an old box in the back of my closet. It held the few papers I'd kept from childhood. Report cards, a crayon drawing of a house, a birthday card from my mother with no mention of Rick. At the very bottom was a photocopy of that thick envelope from years ago, the one with my name on it. The copy was blurry, but I could still make out a word under the logo of a law office. Beneficiary. I slipped it into the same folder as the request form. The county archives building was quieter than the main office. No TV on the wall here. Just the soft echo of footsteps and the faint smell of dust and ink. A woman behind the front desk looked up as I approached. Can I help you? She asked. I need to file a request for sealed records, I said, sliding the form across. She studied it, then checked something on her computer. You're a bit early, she said. The seal doesn't come off until next month. I know, I said. I was told I could file now, so it's ready. She nodded. That's smart. We'll log it and pull the file into the review queue. On the day the seal expires, you'll need to come back in person with ID. Then we can let you view the materials. She glanced at the screen again and frowned slightly. This one's been sitting a long time, she murmured. Surprised no one looked at it sooner. Me too, I said. She stamped the form, wrote a reference number on the top, and handed me a small slip with the same number. Keep this safe, she said. You'll need it, and you might want to bring someone with you when you come back. These old cases can be a lot. I thanked her and turned to go. On the counter by the exit was a paper calendar, the kind with big squares for each day. Someone had circled a date in red ink, the same date Harold had shown me, the day my seal would break. I drove back to the garage and finished my shift, fixing a broken street sign, tightening bolts on a loose bench, painting over graffiti. My hands did the work. My mind ran timelines. That night, back at my apartment, I heated a frozen dinner and sat at the small table with my phone face down. I told myself I would not look at it until I finished eating. I lasted 3 bites. There was a new message from Mira in the family group chat. A photo of Rick standing in front of a community center room, pointing and smiling, tape measure hanging from his belt. "Dad's 70th coming up," her message read. "We finally booked the room. Going to be a big one. Everyone better be there. No drama this time, please." Under that, a separate text popped up, just for me. "Seriously, Danny," she wrote. "Try to be supportive for once. He's done a lot for you, even if you don't see it." I stared at the screen. Then I set the phone down next to the folded slip from the archives with my reference number on it. On one side of the table, a daughter preparing a celebration for the man who had handled my life. On the other, a quiet piece of paper waiting to show me what he had really done. The calendar date on the archive slip and the date on the party photo in the chat were only a few days apart. My name is Daniel Hart, and the week the seal lifted felt quieter than it should have. The city kept moving like always. Buses came and went. People rushed to work. Kids dragged backpacks to school. On the surface, nothing was different. Inside my head, everything felt like it was holding its breath. The sealed file opened on a Tuesday. Sam met me outside the archives building that morning. He wore his usual dark suit and a scarf against the cold. He looked more like a teacher than a lawyer, serious and steady. "You ready?" he asked. "No," I said, "but I'm here." He smiled. "That's enough." Inside, the same woman from before recognized me. She checked my ID, compared the number on my slip to something on her screen, then disappeared into the back. When she returned, she carried a thick folder with both hands, like it was heavier than it looked. She set it on the counter between us. "You'll need to review these in the reading room," she said. "No photos. You can request copies at the end. Take your time." In the reading room, the fluorescent lights hummed softly. Sam and I sat at a long wooden table. The folder waited between us. For a moment, neither of us moved. "You open it," he said. So I did. I won't write here what was on those pages. Not yet. They were a mix of forms, letters, signatures, stamps. Some pages yellowed at the edges, some newer. My name was everywhere. So were the names of people I knew too well, my mother, my stepfather, a law office I dimly remembered from an old envelope. Sam read faster than I did. His eyes moved over the pages, his jaw tightening. Every now and then, he'd slide one sheet aside and tap a corner, making a mental note I couldn't see. I didn't ask questions, not right away. I just scanned lines, picked up phrases, felt them lodge in my chest like small stones. Words like beneficiary, custodial guardian, declines interest, signature, witness. At one point, Sam exhaled sharply and pushed away from the table. "Okay," he said. "That's enough for now." "Enough for what?" I asked. My voice sounded far away to my own ears. "Enough to act," he said. We requested copies of several key pages. The clerk at the front counter went to work at a back copier, making familiar whirring sounds. I watched the machine spit out sheet after sheet, each one a new piece of the past, captured in black and white. By the time we left, I carried a slim manila envelope under my arm. It did not look like much, but it had taken my guardian's pages and signatures and a lot of effort to bury what was inside. It had taken 20 years and one stubborn flag in the system to bring it back up. Back at Sam's office, he spread the copies out on his desk in a careful order. "I'm going to explain this once," he said. "Stop me if I go too fast." I nodded. He walked me through it. Not every word, but the shape, the timeline, the choices made when I was too young to know they were choices. The mark where my name should have meant safety and instead became a way to move things around. The place where someone wrote that I had declined something I didn't even know existed. "Can a child decline this?" I asked. Sam gave me a look. "No," he said. "That alone is a problem." He showed me where a clerk had questioned it, where someone else had pushed it through, where Rick's name appeared beside words like guardian and authorization, even though he never adopted me. "It's messy," Sam said. "Some of this may be too old to fully unwind. Statutes of limitation, expired claims, all that fun stuff. But," he tapped one page in particular. "This part? This is different. This didn't just affect the past. It affects right now." I stared at the page he was pointing to. The letters blurred at the edges, but I understood enough. Something that was meant for me had been diverted, held, redirected. The structure was still there, even if the benefits had been going somewhere else. "Tell me straight," I said. "Did he steal from me?" Sam paused, choosing his words. "He took advantage of his position," he said. "He misrepresented your wishes. He signed away things he had no moral right to touch. And the system let him, for a while. But the structure itself, it's not gone. It's like a pipe was bent in the wrong direction. We can still follow it. Can we fix it? I asked. He considered. We can correct records. We can assert your position. We can demand an accounting. And if he benefited beyond what he was allowed, we can seek to claw some of that back, or at the very least cut off his access now. The words felt big, legal, heavy. I sat with them for a moment. What do you need from me? I asked. Sam slid a document across the desk. Permission to act on your behalf, he said. No tricks, just representation. I can't move forward without it. I read it. Simple language. My name. His name. No hidden lines this time. I signed slowly, feeling each letter. Okay, he said. Here's what I suggest. We move quietly at first. File the necessary notices. Notify the institutions involved that you're asserting your rights as the actual party. Put a hold on any further distributions to anyone else, and we prepare for the personal side. The personal side, I repeated. I already knew what he meant. Your stepfather, he said. He's going to find out sooner or later. When he does, he'll either fight or crumble, or both, but it shouldn't happen in a dark corner. People like him do their best work in shadows. He has a big birthday party coming up, I said. Community center. Mira is planning it like it's a royal event. Sam nodded slowly. Public, he said. Witnesses. Interesting. I shook my head. You think I should ruin his party? I think, Sam said carefully, you should decide what you need. One option is to handle this entirely through letters and courts. Clean, private. Another is to bring the truth into the same space where he paraded his version of the story. Not with shouting, not with drama, just facts. I thought of all the times he'd talked about me as a burden. A guest. Someone he had taken in. I thought of that giant smile in Mira's photo, him pointing proudly at the empty room where his celebration would be. I don't want to humiliate him for the sake of it, I said. I'm tired. I want him to know he didn't get away with it. Sam nodded. We can do both, he said. We can file everything properly and be ready. And if you decide that room is the right place to say your piece, we'll be prepared for that too. The next days were a quiet blur of small actions. At night in my apartment, I set up a corner of the table as a sort of command post. I bought a cheap folder and labeled it with my own name, just Heart in thick black marker. I slipped the copies from the archives into plastic sleeves. I added Sam's letters, the notices we would send, the forms we had filed. I created a simple timeline on lined paper. Age 5, first note. Age 8, Rick appears. Age 12, argument about old obligations. Age 17, DMV visit. Age 19, told I didn't belong. Age 42, Harold's flag, archives, Sam's office. Seeing it all in order made my life look like a case file. In a way, that is what it had become. During lunch breaks at work, I stepped outside to call Sam. He told me when each notice went out, when certain accounts were formally frozen pending review, when a particular institution acknowledged receiving our letters and agreed to cooperate. I haven't contacted your family directly, he said. Not yet. The moment I do, the quiet part ends. For now, we're just turning off taps. Good, I said. My mother called twice that week. I let both calls go to voicemail. Her messages were the same as always. Gentle words covering barbs. Daniel, you missed Mira's planning meeting, she said in one. She really wants you to be involved. It would mean a lot if you showed your support for your stepfather after everything he's done for you. Everything he'd done. At night, I lay in bed and watched the ceiling fan turn. I thought of my childhood in that basement apartment. I thought of my mother smiling genuinely then, before the pressed shirts and bigger house and careful lies. I wondered how much of this had been his idea, and how much she had gone along with because it felt safer. Friday afternoon, Sam called with an update. One of the institutions responded faster than I expected, he said. They've confirmed in writing that you're the primary and rightful party. They've suspended all other access. I'll send you a copy of the letter, but I'd like to hold off on explaining it to your family until we're ready to do it in one go. In one go, I repeated. My mind automatically pictured the community center room. Are you going to the party? He asked. Yes, I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. Do you want me there? He asked. I pictured Rick surrounded by his friends, Mira at his side, my mother hovering near the cake. I pictured their faces when the story changed. I did not want to walk into that room alone. Yes, I said again, but not at my side, not like you're attacking him. Just in the room, as a witness. I can do that, Sam said. Bring your folder, the one with your name on it. Leave the originals with me for safekeeping, but bring clear copies. If the moment feels right, you'll know. Saturday came, the day of the party. I woke early, even though I didn't need to. The light through the blinds was gray. My apartment felt smaller than usual. I made coffee and sat at the table with my folder open. I didn't reread everything, I just looked at the first page from the archives. At my name typed neatly at the top. At the date printed in the corner, a reminder of how long this had been sitting under the surface. I slid the pages into a clean, plain envelope. No label, no drama, just paper. I dressed in the nicest clothes I owned. A button-up shirt without stains, dark pants that still fit. I put on my old jacket. It was worn at the cuffs, but it was mine. On the way out, I paused at the door and glanced back at the apartment. For years, this place had been a quiet box where I stored myself between work and brief, uncomfortable family visits. Now, it felt like a base. At the community center, cars already lined the parking lot. Balloons bobbed near the entrance. A banner through the glass doors read, "Happy 70th, Rick," in big, cheerful letters. I spotted Sam's car parked near the far edge. He stood beside it, tying his scarf. When he saw me, he lifted a hand in a calm wave. "You okay?" he asked as I walked up. "I don't know," I said. "But I'm here." He nodded. "Remember, you don't have to do anything you don't want to. The legal side is already in motion. Today is about what you need, not what he deserves." I held up the envelope in my hand. It felt light. Everything inside it was heavy. "I just want him to hear it from me," I said, in the same kind of room where he always told his version of the story. "Then let's go," Sam said. We walked to the entrance together. Just before the door, he slowed and touched my shoulder. "I'll sit in the back," he said. "Blend in. When you look up and see me, remember you're not alone." I nodded. Then I stepped forward, pulled the handle, and heard the soft click of the community center door closing behind me as I walked into the room where my stepfather's story was about to change. When Rick tapped his glass for the toast, I stood up. I walked to the front, envelope in hand. I said I'd discovered a mistake in my records and laid the copies on the table. The room watched while I read the lines where he'd signed for me, where he'd redirected what was mine. I said those rights were restored, his access frozen, and accounting demanded. Sam rose in the back and introduced himself as my attorney. Rick's smile collapsed. No one moved when I pushed the envelope toward him and said, "I belong."